Then in the 70s with Watergate and Nixon, Steve Rogers became disillusioned and cynical, and he quit. He became a new hero, dressed in black, nomad. He went looking for America. Gradually, though, Steve Rogers realized he had responsibilities, and he donned the red, white, and blue suit again, just in time for the Reagan years. Then in 1988, as the Gipper left office, Steve Rogers quit again, because politicians were having him do things to protect the politicians rather than protect America. Shades of Iran-Contra, eh? Well, now Captain America is back. He's realized that it's more than a suit, and now he's the embodiment of freedom. I predict in the 1990s that Captain America will take on the new threat to freedom: pollution, and the deficit, and unemployment, and drugs, and PCBs and toxic waste, and of course the split between the rich and... He's going to be busy. Ronnie Reagan thought the world was going to end in a flash. Ronnie Reagan was president of the United States from 80 to 88, you know, commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful armed forces. You might have seen him as the star of Hellcats of the Navy. AIDS had been around for about 5 years, and Ronnie finally asked what it was. When his physician explained what it was to him, Ronnie said, "Ooh, gee, I always thought the world might end in a flash, but this sounds like it could be worse." It is worse. If only Ronnie had read comic books. Look at this. These are public service comic books, public health comic books from around the world. They are dealing with AIDS. They are dealing with AIDS explicitly. And they're in comic book form because young people trust comic books. Comic books talk about the issues.
Karate Kids. Karate said that Mario had AIDS. The kids were scared. Mario can't live here anymore. We don't want to get AIDS from him. Karate said, no, Mario stays here. He's our friend, and he needs us. No one can get AIDS from just touching him. Mario became more and more sick with AIDS. One day, Karate and Rosa talked to everyone about condoms. Condoms are good. They can protect us from AIDS. Look, a condom is like a balloon.
Well, some good news. I got some mail sent up to me electronically. Let's take a look. I have to admit that first off, I really find it hard to believe that TV Ontario has allowed your show to continue. Well, they haven't. I've been interrupting their signals. Please do not think that I do not enjoy your show, because I actually believe it to be the best TV program I've ever seen in the 22 years that I've watched TV. Stephen Andrew also asks, does Commander Rick have a Canadian flag on his arm? Yes, he does. But if you send me in one, I'll put one on my coat, too. Dear Commander Rick, most of your side comments make more sense to me than the news items from radio or TV that I hear, or the newspaper items I read. What's going on? Well, what's going on is that I'm not running for office, I'm not selling anything, and I'm so far up in space, nobody can punch my lights out. It's always a pleasure to catch your signal on my receiver, and a secret delight to discover that I am not the only one afloat on the cosmic foam. Well, Philip, we've just discovered there isn't enough room for all of us on the cosmic foam, and you'll have to leave. I saw a great new science fiction television show. It's called The Cosby Show. It takes place on this planet with millions of different species of bugs and animals. Mayday! Mayday! This is Commander Rick calling Earth. Come in, you surface dwellers, you prisoners of gravity. Greetings, prisoners of gravity. Hello, Earthlings. This is Commander Rick on board Reality One. I've been kind of down lately, kind of lonely, you know. Got so bad sometimes that I even miss Earth. Not all of Earth, but, you know, just some things, like to feel the acid rain on your face, to look up and see the sun peeking through the holes in the ozone layer, to go out and walk where the rainforest once stood, or to hear the sound of birds choking on an Alaskan oil spill, to be with friends staring at a TV set, Or the city, Christmas, the hustle and bustle of people running to and fro, trying to find a place or a bench to sleep on at night. Oh, it's depressing sometimes. I wish there was someone I could talk to, you know? Well, there is. Well, that's handy. Maybe I'll give him a call. You know, when you have 4,000 channels to choose from, eventually you can find something worth watching. I just locked into the Toronto Comic and Sequential Art Exposition. It's Canada's biggest comic book convention. If you've never been to a comic book convention or a science fiction convention, you've got to go. It's a great opportunity to meet a lot of your heroes.
What I've noticed most was an absence of a Canadian national show, a show of large caliber, similar to in the United States, Chicago and San Diego. My hope and our hope is that Toronto will eventually get a national show along those sizes.
It was a little bit too much hard work for me, but I really wanted to see, besides that, I wanted to see some of the big artists and writers in the field get up here, because not very many of them do. And I know there's a lot of people in Toronto that wanted to meet these people.
Hello, my name is Harlan Ellison. I am, in fact, a world-famous author, and I'm here in Toronto at the Comic and Sequential Art Convention to talk and comment on the passing scene and to comment about comic books, which is one of my adorations. And I've been asked to introduce myself, and I think only a fool would say, oh, hi, I'm Harlan. I am really, truly world-famous. You can trust me on this. I would not lie to you. The comic book is an art form that has existed now in this country for over 50 years, 60, 70 years. It is honored around the rest of the world, and only on the North American continent, in America and here in Canada, where comic books are censored mindlessly by people I don't know who perhaps have not had a good bowel movement in 200,000 years. They are honored in other countries. In Japan, businessmen go to work with their attaché case with their computer and a manga comic book in it, or a manga, as it's pronounced there. In Italy, they have comic book festivals where they honor comic book artists. And I've been a big fan since I was a kid. Being 55 years old, I bought my first comic when I was 5 years old in 1939. So I've been a lover of comics ever since I was a kid. It's always seemed to me to be a perfectly acceptable way of training people to read, of teaching kids morality. I mean, comic books are very big on good as opposed to evil, right as opposed to wrong, responsibility as opposed to selfishness. If all of the derangos on the religious right would actually read a comic book once in a while, instead of holding them up and saying how they're satanic, they would see that they really do come down firmly and solidly 100% on the side of proper behavior. And even if they don't, it's none of their damn business. Let them stay in their churches, and we will stay in the museums. Stories of imagination always work well in a visual medium. The more fantastic the idea, the more interestingly well it works on a comic book page. You see, because a comic book combines the best of movies, the best of the novel, the best of painting. You have all of these things. You have room for the interior monologue, which you get in a novel, but you also have all of the action, all of the physical phantasmagoria that you can get in a motion picture. And in fact, when I write a comic, which I do every once in a while, just, you know, for pleasure, to keep my hand in, and I think of something absolutely amazing, I know that it would cost millions of dollars to do it on a studio soundstage, but I can have it in a comic book with no trouble. It's also great fun as an adult to write the comics that you enjoyed as a kid. I wrote a Batman. I wrote this issue of Batman a few years back, and it was a great pleasure just to be able to sit down and write about a character with which I had grown up. You see, I've been actually at this convention for several days now, and people have been coming up with stacks of books like this and saying, sign, sign. I haven't had an opportunity even to eat or go to the bathroom in some time, so what you're getting here is a sort of demented interview. My favorite comics, it changes. I mean, I like a lot of comics from years past that are no longer available, but currently, things that I enjoy reading are a comic book called Concrete, written by Paul Chadwick. I enjoy anything written by a man named Steve Bissett, who is well known for his Swamp Thing comics. The man is a giant. I'm an old man. I should be allowed to sit in my rocking chair, and the worst thing I should have to worry about is whether my rocker faces to the sun or away from the sun. Instead, I have somehow been asked to be the conscience of the universe here. Why did you come at me with this one-eyed gimlet? I was signing books for people, very happy.
The 1989 Toronto Comic Convention had some great people on hand. Harlan Ellison was there. Harlan has written all sorts of great books. Just ask him.
Leave me alone.
Hi, Commander Rick. My name's Steve Lacroix. I'm at the Comic Sequential Art Convention. and I always watch your show. This drawing was given to me by Ty Templeton. I asked him to draw the picture for me. I go from artist to artist, you know, paying for sketches, and so far my collection's getting pretty big.
You know, we comic book fans and science fiction fans like to think that we're a little more intelligent, a little more sensitive, a little more aware than the average bag of flesh. So it's especially embarrassing when one of us acts like a complete dork. So if you're going to a convention, here are Commander Rick's etiquette rules. Rule 1, you're still in the civilized world, so please and thank you still apply, okay? Rule 2, if you're going to bring in a comic or a book for the author or the creator to autograph for you, don't bring in everything they ever wrote. One of the joys of going to a convention is meeting all of your heroes. And when they're behind their table, they're fair game for questions and conversation. But rule 3, when they're out elsewhere, leave them alone. Alan Moore has stopped going to comic conventions because fans were following him into the can and shoving magazines under the stall for him to sign. If I was him, I wouldn't have just signed them. Rule 4, if you're going to come to the convention in costume, come in one that's safe. A Captain Porcupine outfit is not going to make you a lot of friends. Rule 5, don't eat, smoke, or drink around an artist's original artwork. If Bill Sienkiewicz wants coffee stains and cigarette butts all over his artwork, he'll smear them on there himself. And finally, Rule 6. If you meet an artist whose work you've always admired, you may ask him to do a sketch for you. But Rule 6, ask him how much he charges. Some of them will do it for free, fine. But a lot of them do charge, and don't get PO'd if they do charge you. How'd you like it if they came into your place of work and said, gee, I really like the way you tune cars. Could you do my Chev for free? I mean, you're dealing with artists here, world-famous artists, your heroes, and it's kind of a thrill to be able to go up to them and say, would you do a drawing for me? How much do you charge? And then somebody you've always admired says, I'll do a drawing for you for $10. And you can say, well, I'll give you $1. And then they'll say 8, and $3, 5, 450, or get out of here. What do you mean 450? Look, you're not worth more than 450. And then you start fighting and hitting. That's the excitement.
Welcome to Educational TV, all you children out there.
I'm Steve Sappel with Marvel Comics. Whenever there's a convention of this size, one that we feel we're going to be able to reach a lot of our readers and talk to them and get a lot of feedback from those readers as to just how we're doing, we like to come out and set up a display and meet with them. This is one of the best ways we can get feedback on the comic books that we publish. A convention is almost a cross between a trade show and a flea market, in that this type of a convention will often have the publishers come to set up, to meet, to sort of peddle their wares. Although we don't actually sell comic books, we try to create enthusiasm for the material. We also show a lot of the material that's going to be coming up. We'll do presentations and slideshows and the like. You also have a lot of people selling the more collectible comic books and the new comic book material that the readers may not be aware of. I will take the input from the fans back to the editors. I'll say that this was a concern, this was something that they found working really well, and I must admit, these days it seems to be a little bit more prevalent that folks are coming up, the whole atmosphere is very positive. They come back and they tell me what is working, and so the type of feedback I'm often taking back is, continue to do this type of thing because this is working, because it's getting very good response. It's difficult for any person to break into comics by long distance. It takes patience, it takes persistence, and of course it takes talent. When an editor's main concern is to get a comic book out on a very regular basis, that is what he focuses on, and so he cannot always keep track of all of the artists and writers available in the field. Now, if a writer or an editor, or excuse me, a writer or an artist sends material from long distance and happens to hit at the right moment, there may be an opening, such as there was recently on The Incredible Hulk, and the new artist on The Incredible Hulk is a Canadian artist, Dale Keane. Well, that was a really good stroke of luck, and it showed that Dale had the talent to take on the series. But if there's not an opening at that moment, Dale's best bet would have been to keep in touch so that he would be primary in their minds when the time came.
Comic books are as valid an art form as any other art form. The only limitations on that are our own imaginations and our own talents, I think. Comics have changed tremendously over the years. Once upon a time, it was basically a 10-cent entertainment for kids, a wonderful 10-cent entertainment for kids, but certainly nothing approaching what it is today, which is what it's becoming more and more, is just that. It's an art form which can encompass any kind of story told in any kind of way. The plot is kind of hard to encapsulate. If I was going to be glib and make a one-liner, it's Oliver Twist in space, or Sid Arthur in space. If I wanted to be philosophical, it's about the journey from unconscious innocence to conscious innocence. It's the adventures of a boy coming of age, but he's coming of age in a very, very strange universe. And it's the story is being told by the same boy as an old man looking back on his life, and as far as I know, lying about the whole story. We don't really know. But it's him looking back on this very, very pivotal time in his life when he went from a boy to a man, basically. To discuss the plot of Blood would be like discussing the depths of my unconscious. My one-liner on Blood was that I tried to consciously write from my unconscious.
Bill Sienkiewicz, the artist on Electra Assassin, The Shadow, and the controversial graphic novel Brought to Light, was also another big guest at the 1989 Toronto Comic Convention. He was big, he was 30 feet tall.
My name is Bill Sienkiewicz. I'm a commercial artist, an illustrator in the comic book field, as well as associated, fields, illustration, record covers, book covers, writer, sort of, and also I do plumbing on the side. Ever since I was a kid, it was just, I don't know, it was like, I guess some kids have a burning desire. I mean, it always, the form always captivated me. Maybe it was the idea of telling stories, it was being in control of orchestrating a whole world. Maybe as a child being particularly feeling alone, like during periods of loneliness and not feeling like I had many friends in a certain area that I lived, it was a way of like creating my own friends and creating their lives and giving elements of control to their lives. And it was cheaper than having a model railroad set, So I do really feel like comics have changed over the years. Speaking from when I began to read them, they've changed. I mean, of course, there's the elements of price, which is and inflation, which affects everything. But comics, like any popular cultural medium, reflect the times. I think the Batman movie came about pretty much as a result of Frank Miller's Dark Knight, the treatment of Dark Knight. So in that respect, and that created a whole cultural wave.
Vicky Vale.
Bruce Wayne.
And what do you do for a living?
Lieutenant, is there a 6-foot bat in Gotham City?
Nice outfit.
You look fine.
I didn't ask. I have given a name to my pain.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Where did you get those wonderful toys?
My life is really complex. Winged freak terrorizes. Wait till they get a load of me.
The Batman phenomenon, I think, has probably done more to put comics back in the cradle of juvenilia that we've struggled to get out of in the 80s. We've just been getting something of a profile in the mass media. The comics aren't juvenilia any longer. They're not aimed only at children. And now along comes the Batman phenomenon, which I think has portrayed comics as something that's fit for children or just a kind of escapist entertainment, which they don't have to be. I'm Gary Groff. I edit a magazine called The Comics Journal, and I'm also one of the publishers of Fantagraphics books. Fantagraphics started by publishing the Journal, in which we tried to criticize comics on the same level as serious art and literature criticized, and we started publishing comic books basically to realize those same goals, to publish the kinds of comics that met the standards we espoused in the Comics Journal. Gilbert and Jaime Hernandez, along with their brother Mario, who was drawing at the time, self-published their own small 32-page comic book called Love and Rockets. They just did the pages, took it down to a quick print place down the street, printed something like 500 copies, and tried to sell it. They sent the Comics Journal a copy. According to Gilbert, they sent it to the Journal because we were the toughest critics, and if they could withstand us, they could withstand anything. And I was so taken by it that I immediately wrote to them and asked them if they wanted to be published by us. And they took us up on the offer, and we've been publishing them ever since for close to 8 years now.
Jaime and Gilbert Hernandez were special guests at the Toronto convention. Jaime and Gilbert are the creators of one of Commander Rick's favorite adult comics, Love and Rockets.
I'm Gilbert Hernandez, and I do one half of Love and Rockets.
I'm Jaime Hernandez, and I do the other half.
We'd read comics all, since we were kids, and we just developed this love for them. But as we grew older, we found that most comic books didn't grow with us. So we sort of lost interest in that and had our own lives as teenagers, as party animals and crazy rock and rollers. But we still like comics to an extent. But we would read them and they didn't have anything to connect to, really, on a personal level. But we'd always been copying comics, so we knew how to draw them. So it was almost being inspired by, say, underground comics and, say, like the punk rock movement, where you could do anything you wanted. It didn't matter, what subjects you wanted to tackle. And what eventually happened is we accumulated enough material that was half fantasy and half realistic, or what we call realistic, and put them together, sort of, as an organic whole. We didn't think it would take off, and so we had the book printed, self-published, and I happened to get in contact with Gary Groff, who publishes the Comics Journal, and the Comics Journal is known for severe criticism of the comics medium.
Sometimes I start with just a conversation between two people, or sometimes I'll start with just one panel of two people walking in a certain setting, and it'll just stem from there. And it just the way, there's no fixed plan of how the story's going to come out, or how the structure or anything. It's just the way it comes to me, I'll write some, I'll draw some first. Sometimes the dialogue will carry the story, but a lot of times the art will as well.
It was a slow following. It's got a pretty good following now, but we couldn't give it away at the first convention we took it to. That's the old story, right? The first issues are lying in the remainders tables, hanging over, the slots, and, we're kind of whimpering, going, well, it didn't turn out like we thought, And now those books are going for more money than I can afford. Love and Rockets is a magazine form, and they're reprinted in collections as trade paperbacks. And I think with the new market of putting, comic book graphic albums in bookstores is helping a lot. We're getting a lot of response from people outside of comics.
One of the great things about going to a comic book convention is that you get to see what the publishers have planned for the future, and then you know something your friends don't, and you can be really arrogant.
I started as a cartoonist, and I still am technically, although early on I found that I had a flair for business that not many cartoonists had. And so I began representing other artists. And after a couple of years, I realized I couldn't be both, so publishing's really been full-time. We're doing Little Abner, for example, by Al Cap, which is a personal favorite of mine. That's a 43-year run, which we'll be doing in its entirety. We're doing the complete Steve Canyon by Milton Caniff. We're doing Flash Gordon, Nancy and Sluggo. I mean, it's quite a wide range. Our position is that a lot of the classic strips deserve to stay in print, and like Huckleberry Finn, we feel Little Abner is a timeless classic for the ages. What we're finding is that hardcover books of a durable nature are very popular. There's an older, more affluent audience out there that doesn't look upon comics as a throwaway item anymore. When they were a kid, they might have paid a dime for a comic and pitched it, and now they're 40, 50 years old, and they're saying, man, I miss that stuff. And we have a tremendous audience that's growing in that area. Libraries, collectors. Well, we've been exclusively doing Will's work. He's a giant in the field. This, I think, is his 55th year doing comics. He was there at the birth of comics. And he's somebody who not only spans the history of comics, but he's been an innovator all the way. He's been someone that other cartoonists mimicked and looked to for inspiration to this day. Now in his 70s, when most artists have hung up their hat and enjoy retirement, he's working on his most ambitious work to date, over 200 pages of autobiographical material. It was fun being disreputable for a long time, but I must say the attention they've been getting is finally proving what we thought all along, that it's a valid art form. It was unnecessarily demeaned by academics and most booksellers, and in America in particular, I think it's taken a long time since cartoons in comic format were born in America. Ironically enough, it's had to go overseas, be popular there, and bounce back, just like jazz and modern art and other phenomenon. And it's good to see someone like a Will Eisner, who started in the ghetto of comic books, and to see it come full circle, and now he is a respected artist.
Well, this is a poster that a person who used to work for us made, and every year when we started going to conventions, we decided to get it signed, so we got all the artists signed and came to Toronto, and since there's so many artists here, we got the artists assigned all around our poster. Today I met Dave Ross, who signed the poster. Yesterday I met Bill Sankovich. I enjoy collecting comics. I enjoy reading comics.
Well, some good news. I got some mail sent up to me electronically.
Well, Commander Rick, what I'd like to know is, in outer space, do you guys have to stoop and scoop, or do you reach for it?
I can't understand why Rick would take off without saying goodbye. You'd think if a guy had 4,000 stations up there, he could call his mother.
Mother?
I think that the same artistic sensibility that permits a movie to work is what works in a comic book. You're dealing with visuals and comics well drawn. I mean, if you've ever looked at, say, Will Eisner's work, he uses cinematic technique, and Fellini has said that he studied Will Eisner's The Spirit to learn a lot about film technique. I work in motion pictures, I work in television, and I write a script visually. I see it in my head. And that's the same way that I would write a comic book. I would start with a long shot and come into a medium close, and then into a tight close-up shot, or a two shot of two people talking. And it gives you the same kind of sense of movement. And that's one of the nice things that comics has going for it.
I'm starting to lose the signal again. Listen, drop me a line. I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Until then, keep the faith. And remember, nobody has all the answers. Nobody is right all the time. And no...
It's 7:30 on...
This is TV Ontario, Channel 19 in Toronto, Channel 13 in Huntsville.
Mayday! Mayday! This is Commander Rick calling Earth. Come in, you surface dwellers, you prisoners of gravity. Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick on board Reality One. Well, now that we're getting to know each other a little better, I think it's time we had a little talk about science fiction, comic books, horror, and sex. Why? Well, why? Sex is actually the one area where science fiction has lagged behind the real world, whatever that is. It's like, until 1960, there was no sex. Science fiction writers could come up with all sorts of amazing ways to get people to fly off into space or travel through time, but when they tried to put two people in bed at the same time, it was like, force field.
I haven't had a great deal of...
Yeah, if you're gonna show a man and a woman lying together, they better be riddled with bullet holes. Sex is a deeply personal thing. Violence is a social activity. Think of it as special effects, right? And yet, name a science fiction film or a horror film or a fantasy film that doesn't have a love story in it somewhere. Science fiction or horror films that didn't have a love story in them somewhere. Alien, The Exorcist, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. Oh, wait, actually, that had that big baby floating at the end, didn't it? Okay, so 2 movies, Alien and Exorcist. No, Alien did have a love story, and it was cut out of the script at the last moment. Okay, so 1 film, The Exorcist. License to Kill is a 1960s science fiction was basically a bunch of male white engineers writing for each other. Secondly, everybody figured science fiction and comic books were just for kids. After all, they're only about time travel, war,